Yeah, there's a famous story of this guy who had a pet chimp. The thing about chimps is you can keep them when they're young, and then they get older, and it's like a man, but a man that's 5 times stronger than you, and like, why is he going to listen to you? So I think he started biting off fingers. It's one of the things that chimps do. When chimps get mad at you, they bite off your finger. Like, they don't give a fuck if you're injured. They have no remorse, and they're intelligent. And so when you do something for someone else, but you don't do something for them, they get rage, like horrific rage. So this guy gets rid of this chimp, brings it to a shelter, and he goes to visit it every year, and the chimp goes to see him like, oh, my friend, I miss you, why can't I come home? But he can't come home ever, because he would just take over the house. So this guy goes to visit the chimp, and he brings a birthday cake. Happy birthday, buddy. And the other chimps that are in cages right next to it are like, this motherfucker didn't bring me a cake. So they figure out a way to get out, and they got out, and they attacked the man, and they tore him apart. They tore his face off, they tore his dick off, they tore his feet off, because they did it to try to take away from him the things he wants and needs. Like, chimps recognize you need your fingers in order to do things, you need your face in order to see, you need your dick in order to fuck, so that's the things they go after. That guy killed 10% of the population. 10%! They do a carbon, where they do like soil samples?
Yeah.
They find out that during that time, the carbon level, like people burning fires, decreased at a significant measurable percentage because there was less humans. They think they killed somewhere between 50 and 70 million people during his lifetime. Dude, they were lighting corpses on fire and launching them with catapults onto people's houses to burn them down. When they would siege a city, they would stay outside of the city for as long as it took. And everyone knew they were going to get it eventually. It's like, how much food do you have? How long can you wait? And they would keep bringing supply chains, so they would always have food. And then they would capture people who fled, and they would take those people and put them on the front of the line and march them forward like a human shield. And that's how they would get into some of the castles. When you see an orca killing a whale, you're like, oh, well, that's where they got their name, right?
Mm-hmm. Killer whale, yeah.
It's because they kill whales.
Yep, and they are a whale. They're in that family.
Yeah.
You know? They're marine mammals.
Well, they kill dolphins too, right?
Yeah, they're dolphins, whales, fish, stingrays,
Sharks.
seals, sea lions, sharks.
But aren't they pretty cool to people in general in the wild?
Yeah.
That's strange.
I believe there has never been an attack on a human being by an orca in the wild, period. There have been multiple in aquariums, there's been shows going on, that kind of stuff, but I believe there's never actually been a recorded case of a death by orca in the wild, which just shows their intelligence, right? It shows they look at you and go, nope, that's not on the menu. Like, that's not something I need to eat.
But they must be hungry sometimes.
Well, what's interesting about orcas is there's really two sects of their diet. There's orcas that only eat marine mammals, and there's orcas that only eat stingrays and some other fish species. And so I think, for those people, you see some of those incredible photographers like Paul Nicklin and stuff like that get those images of them underwater. They're diving with the fish-eating orcas. I think a few people have been successful in diving with the mammal-eating ones, but I feel like that's a dice roll.
There was always this curiosity, like, when did the human race first invent civilization? And the current theory is that it was about 6,000 years ago. It's Mesopotamia, it's Sumer, and these areas, which is where we found the first written language, first mathematics, cuneiform language. But what they believe is that's a restarting of civilization, and that very likely civilization existed at a very, very high level somewhere around 11,800 years ago. What caused the end of the Ice Age also caused just a mass destruction all throughout the universe, or all throughout the Earth, rather, of particles from space slamming into the Earth. That the Earth goes through these comet storms periodically, and it happens, I think it's every June and every November. And when they go through these clouds of comets, occasionally we get hit by big ones, and there's a lot of evidence for this.
There's a location in the Western Sahara Desert of Mauritania called the Richat Structure. It's also commonly referred to as the Eye of the Sahara. It's a site that most people have never seen or heard of before, which is truly peculiar because it's so spectacular. And what's so spectacular about this is that it just so happens to match more than a dozen striking similarities to what Plato had described as the lost ancient capital city of Atlantis. Plato had described Atlantis as being the capital. Let me just mention that because it was an empire said to be made up of 10 kingdoms. And what I'm focusing on is the lost capital city, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 3 of water, 2 of land, which matches the Richat structure. It also was said to have an opening to the sea at the south, and if you look at it from satellite imagery, you can clearly see that water had ran through it. Furthermore, it was said to have mountains to the north, and you just so happen to have mountains called the Atlas mountain chain, which Atlas was said to be the very first king of Atlantis. And what's interesting is that the very first known king of Mauritania, which is where the Richat structure is located, their very first known king was also named Atlas.
The only animal that I don't feel bad about in the zoo is giraffes.
They're having a great time.
They don't seem to have any problem with it at all. Like, another day with no lions.
Well, it's like that.
Well, as long as they have a big enough enclosure and they can walk around, they don't seem to have any problem with it.
Yeah, it sucks for the predators because they can't, hunt.
Exactly.
And then they always put the tiger, next to the giraffe or the lion just to fuck with them. They're kind of cruel with that. Put them in different places.
Well, you shouldn't put them there at all.
Yeah.
And I get it does protect some endangered species, but boy, I think if we really care about animals, we should put a lot more money into it, and there should be a lot larger spaces, and it shouldn't be anything remotely resembling a zoo. If you really want to go see an animal, you should go on a fucking safari and drive through these areas where they're killing gazelles and they're doing normal lion shit. Cleopatra lived closer to the invention of the iPhone than she did to the construction of the pyramids. Yep. Even if you use the conventional 2500 BC dating of the construction of the pyramids, which is also under debate. The most baffling thing is, how did they do it? There's no simple answers. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. There's no simple answers. How did they do it? How how did they have such incredible sophistication in their construction methods? How did they get those massive 80+ ton stones 500 miles down from the mountains with no equipment, no heavy machinery? Whatever they did, I think it's reasonable to say that in a different way, I don't think they had iPhones, I don't think they had email, but they were probably more sophisticated than us today in their ability to manipulate stone and make construction.
The Great Pyramid remains to me an abiding mystery, which despite probably 100 or more visits to the Great Pyramid and being inside it and spending the night in it and exploring every passage and every chamber, including the so-called relieving chambers above the King's Chamber, I still can't figure it out.
There's this aircraft that was carrying the Speaker of the House. Hale Boggs was a Democrat, and he was the Speaker of the House in the 70s. And Alaska had, at that time, only one. Alaska had a sole congressman. There was an airplane that had Begich, their sole congressman, the Speaker of the House, an assistant, and a pilot that went down in Alaska in the 70s. Still no one's found that plane. Then you get into the huge number of all these missing aircraft, and like all that search centered around this glacier. And we went to this other site where this military transport plane years ago did go down in a glacier, and the glacier swallowed it. And I think it was like, 20 some years later, that glacier started to spit that plane out at the toe of the glacier. Like it carried it, I don't know what it is, 13 miles under the ice, and then started to spit out human remains and plane parts.